The worst mistake you can make at 2 o'clock in the morning after a brutal 16-hour lab shift isn't spilling hazardous chemicals. It's letting your sleep-deprived fingers hover over a glowing touchscreen. My name is Evan. I was an Omega working in the highly competitive cutthroat underbelly of a corporate biotech lab. To survive, I had to hide my true secondary gender behind heavy chemical scent blockers, smelling of nothing but bitter rubbing alcohol and faint paper dust to everyone around me. I was entirely alone, facing an unplanned pregnancy with zero safety nets. My only real lifeline was my chaotic best friend, Julian. That night, my hands were trembling with pure exhaustion as I finally stared at the black and white ultrasound thermal paper from the clinic. Julian had been badgering me for days to see it. Clumsily, my foggy brain typed in a number and hit send. I practically threw the phone face down onto my desk, praying my morning sickness wouldn't kick in before I finally hit my mattress. But then a sudden, aggressive phone vibration shattered the silence. I flipped the screen over. It wasn't Julian. Whose medical profile is this? And why was it routed to a secured executive terminal? Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. My thumbs flew across the keyboard in a desperate frenzy, typing an apology, begging them to just hit delete and ignore the attachment. The response was instant. Cold. Imperial. I don't delete unauthorized data packets sent to my personal line. This is a black and white fetal ultrasound with a timestamp from the Sector 4 clinic. I'll ask you one more time. Who are you? And who is the Alpha? My heart sank straight into my stomach. I frantically replied, telling the stranger that it was a private matter, that the Alpha was a mutual mistake from a club 5 weeks ago, and that I didn't even know his real name. There was a heavy, suffocating pause. Then, the final message lit up my dark room. A mistake? 5 weeks ago. The Onyx Lounge in the High District. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the desk. How could a complete stranger know the exact, hidden club where my life had changed? I didn't sleep a single wink. By 8 o'clock the next morning, I was back at my station, trying to pretend the numbers on my monitor weren't blurring together. But the true nightmare didn't start until my boss, Director Gareth, called a mandatory emergency floor meeting. Gareth stood before the sea of cubicles, his voice booming with arrogant satisfaction. He announced that our fiercest competitor, Valerius Automation, the multi-billion-dollar tech empire, had suffered a massive system breach. Someone had leaked an encrypted file directly to the CEO's private, unlisted personal terminal, driving the Billionaire Alpha to absolute madness. Listening to his words, a terrifying realization crashed over me. The unlisted number I had texted by mistake, it wasn't a civilian. The mysterious, overwhelming Alpha from 5 weeks ago, the one whose scent felt like a winter frost storm cutting through my defenses, was Valerius himself, the most powerful, ruthless man in the hemisphere, and I had just sent him the direct proof of his own error. Before I could even think of a plan, a deafening mechanical thud echoed through the entire building. The main elevator shafts locked down. The security grid was overwritten from the outside. Suddenly, the heavy laboratory doors were violently forced open with a metallic crunch. The room's temperature seemed to plunge into freezing territory. The sterile smell of the laboratory was completely wiped out by an untamed, thunderous wave of pure cedarwood and frosted ozone pheromones. Valerius stepped through the smoke, flanked by an armed security detail. His piercing silver-gray eyes swept over the rows of cowering employees, completely ignoring Gareth's stuttered demands, until they locked directly onto me. "I'm not looking for a file, Director," Valerius said, his voice low, deep, and terrifyingly calm. "I'm here to collect my property." Part 3. The Trap and the Truth. Within 10 minutes, I was swept out of the facility and placed into the hyper-luxurious penthouse suite at the top of the Valerius spire. I sat rigidly on a plush sofa, my hands locked protectively over my stomach, my heart hammering against my ribs. Valerius walked toward me, his commanding presence casting a long shadow as he offered me a nutrient infusion from a high-tier clinic. I pushed the glass away, my amber eyes burning with defiance. I yelled at him, calling him a madman for tracking my phone's GPS and staging a corporate raid over an accidental text message. But Valerius didn't yell back. Instead, he knelt right in front of me, his massive hand gently but firmly closing over my trembling fingers, pressing them against the fabric of my shirt. He looked directly into my eyes and revealed a truth that turned my world upside down. 5 weeks ago wasn't a coincidence. My boss, Gareth, knew Valerius's biological timeline. He had intentionally altered my lab schedule, compromised my suppressants, and sent me to that lounge as bait to steal genetic data markers for a military project. I was supposed to be a corporate sacrifice play, but Gareth miscalculated one vital factor, Valerius whispered, his scent flaring with a dark, deeply possessive intensity. My biology didn't see a sample container. My alpha recognized a mate. When you sent that ultrasound to my terminal, you didn't trigger a corporate leak. You triggered a fated bond that my instincts have been screaming to find for 35 days. When Gareth realized his plan had failed, he retaliated, threatening to release the original project files to the High Oversight Board to ruin the Valerius family name. I panicked, telling Valerius that staying with me would destroy his legacy and his wealth. But an alpha driven to the brink of madness by his mate's safety doesn't care about a balance sheet. What followed was 3 weeks of absolute corporate warfare. Valerius didn't use lawyers or stocks. He used total systemic destruction. Armed with an unhinged protective fury, he used his complete control over the digital infrastructure to systematically wipe out Gareth's firm. He leaked their corrupt testing records, froze their funding lines, and personally oversaw the demolition of the very labs that had tried to use me as a tool. I watched from the penthouse glass as the rival towers went dark. On his secure comm line, Valerius's voice was as cold as steel. Liquidate the remaining assets. Burn the servers. Leave Director Gareth with nothing but the clothes on his back. No one touches my mate and lives to profit from it. Part 5. The Perfect Sanctuary. 3 years later, the ashes of the old biotech wars had completely settled. The cold glass towers were no longer sterile testing grounds. They had been opened up, filled with natural sunlight and cascading green gardens. In the center of a sunlit private workshop, our 3-year-old boy, Ren, sat on the floorboards. He had fluffy, messy dark hair and large, curious silver-gray eyes, giggling joyfully as he watched a small, translucent blue mechanical butterfly flutter its wings. I stood by the window, a soft silk scarf loosely wrapped around my neck, subtly shifting to reveal a completely healed, deep silver bond mark. I felt a deep, unshakable sense of peace. Suddenly, a large pair of strong arms wrapped securely around my waist from behind, and the familiar, grounding warmth of winter frost and cedarwood enveloped me. Valerius leaned his chin on my shoulder, letting out a deep, contented, rumbling purr. He joked that Ren had my exact analytical focus, watching our son try to dismantle the tiny gear train. I laughed, reminding him that the boy got his absolute stubbornness directly from his father. I mentioned that the High Council had called again, begging the former chancellor to return to his executive seat. Valerius tightened his embrace around me, looking down at our small family with a deep, consuming devotion. "Tell them the chancellor has retired permanently," he murmured softly, pressing a lingering kiss against my jaw. I spent a lifetime building an empire of glass and concrete, but it turns out all I ever needed to protect was right here in this room. As Ren's laughter echoed through the warm penthouse, I realized that a single wrong number can completely shatter your world, or it can finally bring you home.